From the Ticats Audio Network, this is a Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today.
We've had a lot of fun with Ticats this week. I'm RJ Broadhead with Steve Milton, Luke Tasker, and Mike Daly. It has been a great group. We've had some good discussions. Hopefully we've added some insight to the Tiger Cats season for you, the viewers and the listeners. And we've got a show leading into the Friday game, the final game of the regular season in Ottawa for the Tiger Cats, as they will try to improve to 8-10. And then we'll have one more Ticats This Week show at the end of the season next week. We'll talk about some highlights of the season. So that's your warning, guys. Write down a couple of things that so you're not scrambling through 18 games an hour before the show. And
well, Steve Milton has 30 years of Ticats football locked up there, airtight, accessible at any moment. So not to worry about him.
Okay. Accessibility, that's the name of this league, right?
There you go.
Yes. Isn't that what they call it? Yeah, it's
right.
Accessible league. I wish I could access it as easily as Luke gives me credit for.
So going into this final game of the season, guys, it's kind of strikes me as a bit of a preseason feel where you know it's going to be the last game of the season for the Tiger Cats, and even the Redblacks know they're going to the playoffs, so they want to stay healthy. But if you're a veteran guy, you know you're going to be on the team next year. Are you going to give 100%? And for some guys, it still is sort of tryouts. Is a preseason mentality what we're going to get? Or, Mike, do you think it'll be, hey, it's football, the kickoff happens, and it doesn't matter if it's the last game, the first game, the Grey Cup, we're playing football?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. I've said this and experienced this. You can't go out onto that field and give anything less than 100%. Number one, you're going to end up putting yourself at risk of injury, because if somebody is playing at 100% and you're playing at 80%, you can imagine what that collision would look like, right? It wouldn't be very favorable. And, you know, we say this all the time, but you're putting film out there. Every single game that the cameras are recording and people can see your type of play is just another clip on your resume of a football player. So you just look at it in that sense where, hey, every chance I get to have more film and make better plays and go out there and make an incredible play for whether it's, you know, the Ticats in this situation for next season or another team down the road as an individual, you look at it that way. I know Ottawa, they'll probably rest a bunch of their starters, but and I also want to go back to the one thing that Luke said is you play a little more free in these type of games. You don't have as much pressure at this point, so now you're having fun because it's not going to, you know, affect anything standing wise or getting into the playoffs. So I'm looking forward to these guys flying around and making some plays because you can't play anything less than 100% in this league.
Is that what we saw against Calgary last week, Luke? A team playing free and they got a great result.
Yeah, like unfortunately free, right? The pressure got dropped off because the playoffs were out of the picture there, and just giving him credit also just for executing really well time and again in the Calgary game. But I agree. I mean, there's just the difference between what we're going to see this weekend for the last game of the season compared to preseason is the nerves. Yes, preseason also doesn't matter, but the nerves are built up. You know, you're going through training camp. The roster's big. You don't have an identity for your team yet, and everyone's kind of feeling their way into the season. So even the vets in some ways have a little bit of nerves in those preseason games. There's no nerves in a game like this weekend, for worse or better. You might see a little bit of self-preservation out there, maybe some more running out of bounds or ducking under tackles for the first down instead of taking some contact. Maybe you see that, and so at times that's appropriate. But we're going to see some good football. And I doubled down on what Mike said there and what we talked about last week is that it is fun to play, and it's certainly fun to play very free and very pressure free. So I think we'll see some fun like we did. I mean, I don't think we expected all that much fun that we got in the Calgary game, and we certainly got a lot of fun plays there. So we'll probably see some of that as well.
Luke, for those viewers who are watching Ticats this week, what
RJ?
happened? What happened?
He looks like a defensive player right now.
I know. I used to get hurt like scoring touchdowns and stuff. Things happen a little differently to me now. My oldest son Steele built a campfire in the backyard. He wanted me to shave off some wood for kindling, and I put a piece of wood in a vise, leaned on it, and I was just moving fast, and the thing snapped up and hit me so hard in the head I thought I was going to pass out on the floor. So I was bleeding down my face, and Steele goes, "Oh, I'll go get Mom," and he runs back inside. So no stitches, just this little thing that our YouTube and other video patrons can see, but I have to leave that on for a week or something.
Hey,
like that.
life is dangerous outside of football, Luke. You better be careful.
It is, yeah. You're much more fragile than I once thought I was. No, all good. I wouldn't even be on the one game if I'm on the Ticats Audio Network like game time decision list right now. So we'll see. I think I'm going to pull through for Friday.
You're a trooper.
If the headset hits me in the wrong place, though, I'm not gonna play just because that'll hurt too much.
Well, you're not going to the playoffs, so
that's right.
You can't sacrifice yourself too much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Steve, when you look at the Tiger Cats record, if they win, they're 8-10. That would be 4 years in a row where they finish with 8 wins. It would be the last 3 seasons at 8-10, and then the shortened COVID season in 2021, they were 8-6. So that 8-win season was better because it was over 500. How do they get over this 8-win hump going forward?
Start better. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's all anybody's talking about, especially guys that know they're coming back next year. They talk about it a lot. And, you say, what's the dynamics of it? I've asked Tim White about it. He said, we just have to find those little types of things. And, of course, Tim himself has a couple of things he's got to work on to start better, which is grab that ball a little better earlier in the year. He had those turnovers, and he wasn't alone. Bo has talked about it. And particularly Milanovic has talked about it. And when the guys who earlier were talking about whether you go hard or easy, of course I agree with the players. They'll never go easy. But Milanovic is also not going to let them. And he's been coaching that way. He's coaching it up to go into with momentum. I think the starting of the year, they'll look back at that and they'll analyze it. I think if they knew how to start better, and Bo said this a dozen times in different ways, he said, if I knew how to start better, we would have done it. But they've got to find a way, and it probably has to do with starting better on the road. They tend to start in the West a little bit. Well, most years, which generally most years except this one, is a tough assignment. But you just got to come into camp with momentum, come out of camp with momentum.
Steve, when you say Bo talks about something, it sounds like something else. Botox.
Yeah, Botox. Oh, sorry. Which is, okay. And just while we're on those kind of things, as a guy that just spent all weekend chopping wood, what do you do with wood in a vise? Like, how do you shave?
Well, no, I was planing it off to make little shavings to light it for the campfire. So
sorry.
back to my face injury.
Through with it now. So.
Yeah.
From Botox to my face injury here makes good connections here.
Which, again, if you're listening and can't see, it's just above your right eye. That's dangerously close to your eye, Luke. You got to wear your safety glasses.
So I've been told from everyone I've seen the past 2 days.
All right, we won't mother you. We're glad you're okay.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll be healthy for Friday.
Perfect. If the Ticats win the game, they're going to miss the playoffs by a point. Ottawa has really spiraled ever since the last meeting against the Tiger Cats. They haven't won. They've lost 5 in a row. They've lost 6 of 7, whereas the Ticats have won 5 of 6. But when you look at how these standings could end, and missing the playoffs by a point, it really creates what could have happened. The 3 games stand out, the one against Saskatchewan, the one against Ottawa, and the one against Winnipeg, where Tiger Cats had leads with under a minute to go, and the other team came back and was able to win. So there's 3 games right there that they couldn't close out that would have got them into the playoffs. On the flip side, if you miss the playoffs by a lot, you tend to say, well, hey, it just wasn't our year. How do you feel, Mike? Would you obviously not want to miss the playoffs, but is it better to miss by a point, or is it better just to really not have a chance?
Yeah, I think if it's missing by a point, there is still some positive left in that, right? And we've seen that with the Calgary game. We've talked about this where there are things to build on, and Coach Milanovic has talked about this as well. There's things to build on to next season, and it's not quite the same turnover that you normally see in the CFL from offseason to offseason. So there's going to be a good group of core guys coming back that can use a little bit of this momentum. The other thing on that as well is if you miss the playoffs by a lot, and we're talking have a really bad season, well, business-wise, everybody's up there looking and saying, hey, you know what? We're going to need to ship most of these people out of here because it just didn't work and there was nothing we can work from, and we had to almost hit the reset button. So if you're going to miss the playoffs, missing by 1 point and putting together a nice little streak at the end of the season is a good way to do it because, people in charge of those decisions are going to look and say, hey, if we just, like you said, RJ, squeak out a couple of those wins early on, this is a completely different season. So we can work with the guys that we have. And, the Ticats were young. We talked about this all the time. And early on in the season, to squeak out those small wins, it usually leans toward more veteran teams because you're able to make less mistakes that you would need to learn from being around the CFL for a while. So that's a little piece of the Ticats there. But yeah, if you're going to miss it, at least miss it by a point so you can get most of your buddies back and run it back again the next season.
Yeah, I suppose in this scenario, Luke, there's fewer changes, and a lot of guys, like Mike said, get valuable experience. They're youngest team in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And the end of this season makes you wish, or makes the team wish that you just had more games. I mean, it's like running out of time in the season, and so you've got young guys who are coming into their own. The mistakes were being limited as the season went along, and it's easy to say, but I think back to the first game in Calgary, which could have been a Ticat win out west to start the season. And I think if you win that game, you find a way to win the Saskatchewan game that was very close in the weeks just following. So and things can get things would have just start progressing so differently. But I go back to what you said, Milty. The faster start, and in my mind, to boil that down one more layer is fewer mistakes early on in the season. It wasn't a lack of explosive offensive plays necessarily. It was giving up big plays on defense, and it was turning the ball over, not taking it away, and taking penalties.
Yeah.
When you look at the streak the Tiger Cats are on, and Ottawa going in the opposite direction, although it was crazy finish. If any of you didn't see the Argos Redblacks game this past week, it was if Argos won, they would get home field in the semi. They did win. They dominated pretty much the whole game until the end. Ottawa would have needed 3 onside kicks to come back and tie the game. They got 2, and on the third one, they barely missed. So Lewis Ward is not only a good field goal kicker, he's really good on those onside kicks. So it was a great comeback and maybe a momentum builder for the Redblacks, but they obviously lost that game. They've lost 5 in a row. Do you think, Steve, the way the Tiger Cats played the Argos this season and how they seem to be peaking now at the end of the year, that the Argos got the opponent they wanted in the East Semi?
I think they did. I'm sure they didn't want to play Hamilton. Also, remember, if they were playing Hamilton in Toronto, is that even an Argo home game?
Yeah.
Right? Given how close it is, and I think they did, but the guys we've been talking a little bit about, we don't know. Even Scott Milanovic was saying today he's not sure what Ottawa is going to do and what kind of situation that they're going to come up against this week. But I think they're going to play everybody. I think they're going to play everybody at least to start. They got to get this thing back on, because it's very tough against Toronto right now, especially if their quarterback Kelly can play anywhere near the level that he can, and he gets confidence. They've got to. They've really got to figure out how they can do this, get their defense back to where it was, and their defense, they're going to win this. If they win this, I think on their defense, holding them close enough that they eventually can penetrate that Toronto secondary with a big play, which Toronto can give up. And they've got the guys that can do that. So, yes, this is the matchup that Toronto would prefer, but that doesn't mean that it's anything but is a guarantee in any means. Now, for Ottawa, it's tough. I mean, no team in the East ever has gone to the Grey Cup without a home game, a home playoff game. The last team that even did it, finishing third, was 50 some odd years ago in 1970. How many years ago is that? 54 years ago. And that's the only time it's ever happened since the modern CFL happened. So the numbers are not there, at least in the East.
That's why Steve Milton is a historian. That is
told you, accessible. It's right here.
Sorry, that kind of put a damper on things, didn't it? It happened to be if in Ottawa. But I really think they're going to. I mean, Drew Brown had, 400 yards last game? Yeah, I think he had 400
A lot
yards.
of it was late.
A lot of it's late. For sure. Mm-hmm. Garbage in basketball. You might call that garbage time. You know, they get 25 points in the fourth quarter when the other team's pulling back and those and they know they're in.
Yeah, it's shocking how often that happens late in a football game where teams are all of a sudden able to move the ball and score touchdowns and get onside kicks. Mike, you're a coach with Laurier, doing a great job with them. I want to get your thoughts on what Steve talked about for Ottawa. Their coaches, that's not a great scenario going into the playoffs. You know you're in. That's great. But do you rest guys? You don't want to go into the playoffs having lost 6 in a row, do you?
Well, I agree with Steve here completely. The only ones that I would look to rest at that point are ones that are like playing pretty banged up or pretty injured, where they're holding on just barely to play. And that's a select few of guys. I don't know who that might be for Ottawa, but Steve, you're exactly right. You can't – there's the confidence level right now with Ottawa is so low because they've had to battle to try to stay in the playoffs because they understood the Ticats were coming back and the situation the Argos were in, and they still couldn't pull off wins. So I think this is a get-right game where at least defensively you get to go up against a juggernaut of an offense with the Ticats here and get to work on things, get to prove yourself again, to get some confidence back. So, I don't see them resting too many guys except for the ones that are, holding on for dear life near the end of this season.
I remember looking at Ottawa's record in that last game against the Tiger Cats. They were 8-3-1, and I remember talking to you, Luke, before the game and saying Ottawa's got a really tough schedule. There's a chance that they might not win a game the rest of the regular season. So if the Ticats can keep winning this last game of the regular season, I was really hoping it was going to come down to who's in and who's out, or who gets to. At that point, Tiger Cats still had an outside shot at hosting a playoff game. Yeah. It is a tough scenario for Ottawa and kind of heartbreaking for the Tiger Cats when you think about how close this final game of the regular season was to who's in, who's out.
It is, and just any one of the games could have made for a possible swing and a meaningful last game of the season, which is always exciting. And so, it is what it is. I mean, the harder thing to think about is to not only any game that you could have had back, but just the plays that made that game swing either direction. And it's just there's 1,000 things. If you go through coaches' tape when you're a player and you watch that, and the things that could have changed games are just inches away at any time during the game. And you extrapolate that, and the whole season is just inches away from the Ticats right now. And like you said, RJ, they win this game and they're 1 point out. That's the way it goes for this year's group. And especially in a year that, it makes it hard too is just how well they played Toronto this year and what that would have looked like in the playoffs. And, I think you said it best. I think Toronto is thrilled that they're not going to be playing the Ticats in the playoffs.
And that 1 point, that happened earlier in the year for the Redblacks. It was a game against Saskatchewan. I believe it was Saskatchewan in overtime who first won the game. They went to the command center, overturned it, and then Ottawa won the game. They went to the command center, overturned that, and then it ends up in a tie. So just a crazy way to get that point, and that's going to be enough to get Ottawa into the playoffs. It's really odd when you think back at how things work out for teams or don't work out for teams. That turned into a massive point for the Redblacks.
Yeah, this is a bit going back to our discussion about momentum, and I'm still not 100% believer in momentum carrying over for that long time. I'll have to trust the players that you can have it. But what I do know is that when it's only 1 point, you have a much better chance of sustaining that momentum than if you lost by a whole bunch, because you'd have to make so many changes. But I believe that is part of what is being not sold to the players, because I think they actually believe it. I can feel it from talking to them, and to every player I talk to feels, especially the guys that are coming back. And I think we're getting a little bit of a look right now at what the future might look. And one of the keys was this. Last week, they started 6 defensive linemen. Most of the year, they've been doing what, 8, 9? I think they know who the 6 are that they want. And I think that's also a little signal to the way that Chris Jones, if he's back next year, will play this game. A little more emphasis on the linebacking and secondary, and being having the 6 guys that you want up front, basically 4 with 2 subs to rotate through for tiring types of things. So I think that's a lot of what. Again, we'll see this week. Make sure that those guys are ready to go. They're ready to sail into the off season.
Let's talk Bo Levi Mitchell. Luke, I want to get everybody's thoughts. I'm going to start with you, Luke, because you're the offensive mind of this Ticats This Week panel. He's going to finish first in passing yards, over 5,000. I thought it would take him a couple of games to get there. Shout out to you, Steve Milton. You said he'd do it. You said it last week on the show.
Yeah, I didn't think he would do it in one game. I didn't think he'd do it by basically the end of the first half.
He was on a mission, and he's going to lead in touchdown passes, yards passing. He has 99 career wins, so one more win gets him to 100. I believe that would make him only the 10th quarterback ever with 100 career wins in the CFL. One game to go. It would be something to definitely play for. We don't have the depth chart yet, but Scott Milanovich, being a former quarterback, he's probably well aware of that statistic, so we'll have to see what happens there. But, Luke, go back to the start of the season and now to present day. How is your evaluation and expectations of Bo Levi Mitchell and what he can do changed?
Well, overall, very impressed with him as a Hamilton Tiger Cat. I don't think anyone knew what to expect. And after such a poor first year in 2023 with the Ticats, ridden with injuries and all that, overall, I was very impressed. There was, of course, a turnover issue at the beginning of the year, but mixed with that was the most drops I've ever seen from a receiving core over the course of a number of games. And so that's hard as a quarterback. I mean, you're trying to correct your own problems, but your efforts in the passing game are being hurt by all those drops throughout the games. I think you saw a progression of Bo with this receiver room, both in eliminating mistakes, turnovers, and drops, and in just communication. I think there was some. There was apparent or almost tangible frustration with Bo early in this season, getting a young receiver room up to speed with what he wanted on the CFL field against these defenses, as to how to interact with the low zones, the angles, and the speed to take on different cuts. I think it was a learning process, but my overall impression of them after the season is that they did climb a ladder of growth. I mean, they got better, and that group together, the quarterbacks and receivers, are playing very, very different as they get ready for this last game against Ottawa than they were in training camp, with many, many fewer mistakes. And so I think Bo did a great job. Interestingly, I don't know how clear it is moving forward. I mean, we'll see what Milanovich wants to do. but I think everyone expects that Bo will be the starting quarterback, and the way that he's throwing the ball. And I think he'd take the one throw back. That was his 6th touchdown throw. He said to us in the post game show. It was a very good. That was a good one. That was a very good. Bo actually threw for 5 touchdown passes, but he interrupted RJ in the post game show and said, "No, I threw 6." Pause.
We're all looking at each other.
Right.
How did we miss that?
And he goes, "I threw 1 to the Calgary defense as well," which is true. So,
and
I
then
think
joked around about trying to let Calgary back in the game so he wouldn't get pulled.
Exactly. So, I think that he is playing very well right now, and his receivers have come along with him.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm with Luke, but I'm a little more clear on you have to bring Bo Levi Mitchell back to be the starter. I know the age and all that kind of stuff, but what he was able to do at the end of the season was incredible. No other quarterbacks were doing what he was doing at the end of the season. And early on, when you're talking about when they had the struggles and the turnover struggles, every game that the Ticats had to win was because Bo Levi had to play unbelievably. Like, they wasn't getting a ton of help other places. There's maybe 1 or 2 games. I remember the rushing game going off for impressive numbers, but that was it. Maybe 1 or 2. So really, this team rested on that O-line and Bo Levi Mitchell. So the O-line protecting him and Bo having to play a really, really good game. And we're talking best quarterback in the league type of game until Chris Jones came in. So there was definitely a learning curve, like Luke said, but I couldn't be more impressed with how he's playing. And obviously that turnover thing was more of a conversation piece between him and Coach Milanovic. It's just, football's one of those things where whatever you put emphasis on, and that's what's going to end up coming to fruition and end up panning out. And obviously the turnovers thing was a huge emphasis, and Bo and Milanovic trusted each other, and that was out the window that second half of the season. So yeah, I think Bo has to come back and he has to be the starter because every other aspect of this team was so young or so new or their first time being with the Cats that one season. And actually, Luke, I'm going to jump to you really quick because I know personally from one season to the next, the comfort level and the skill that I had developed playing football in the CFL was vastly different. So from my first to second to third, and Luke, I don't know if you felt the same thing, but I felt like everything slowed down. Everything was so much easier, and I feel like this Ticats team needs to experience that, and next year it'll be there.
Yeah, and it has to do with how you spend your off season and how you come into training camp. But I certainly had the same experience. I remember I came in halfway through the 2013 season, so it was all moving light speed around me, and I had no idea what was going on. And then I remember just a massive change of perspective going into the 2014 training camp, and then that again. Really, I can remember all the way up until the 2017 training camp, and then I kind of felt like I had a handle on what I was doing, and was sort of maybe as good as I was going to be mentally, and that's an overstatement, but those big leaps were behind me, and you can do that as a young player, and you're still learning the field and the game, and just all the mental burden of your role. If you're training the right way, you can carry that personal momentum. You built your way all the way through a long 18-game season. You can build that into training camp, certainly. And these, I hope that we see that from the 2025 receiving core with Hamilton, some savviness and some ability to make the quarterbacks very, very comfortable as they're making their way through the concepts.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm unequivocal. I mean, he's the quarterback next year, and I think we want to look at this. And Luke talked about training. Look what happened when he got humbled last year. He got humbled, and so what did he do all winter? We all saw it all winter, what he worked on and how his body changed. And take a look what's happened here. Look at that game he had last week. That's game 17 in the season at his age. So that tells you something about the training. That tells you about something that he did to himself and the training that he continued it during the year. And Milanovic was telling me on Tuesday that he was glad that Bo had that kind of game on a Friday night that everybody could see how much how hard he's worked and how hard that training has paid off. And take a look. It wasn't just the first 4 drives. He had a late drive. So not only has he been solid physically late in the season, but late in some games as well of late. And that speaks highly to training. And I expect that to be, now, you lose a bit every year, and who knows what the year is that you drop off on. But he's had the positive reinforcement of that now. And I think that encourages him even more. And you know, as I've said, Marcellus Bowman, probably his best spokesman right now for his private business of training people, is Bo Levi Mitchell. And I think you'll see him even step that up even harder. He also had that little bit of humbleness there when he did get benched. And of course, he got that right back, and look what he made of that opportunity. And I think that's just, in fact, I'll say this. I think they've got the 4 quarterbacks they need for next year. They'll bring other people, but I think they've got the 4 right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And what Bo did when he came back after Taylor Powell got hurt and he got a second chance, there's a life lesson there. You know, you pick yourself up and you get better, and you don't quit, and you work on things you need to work on. I just love what he did, and how can you not cheer for Bo Levi Mitchell? And you talked about Marcellus Bowman, the strength and conditioning coach for the Tiger Cats, who does a great job, and he looks like a strength and conditioning coach too. you see him, you know, okay, well, let's he could
play.
Funny story about that, RJ. Marcellus Bowman was on the team when I came in my first year, and you know, I'm definitely not massive individual. So when I came into the locker room, you used to playing university level players, and looked up and I saw somebody like Marcellus Bowman. I was like, what am I doing here? Like, I better call my mom, tell her I love her. Like, I gotta go to practice against a guy like this. So, but no, Marcellus Bowman, he is an awesome person, awesome player, awesome strength and conditioning coach. But yeah, he looks like he can still play.
Yeah, he told me a great story about when he played, and he had so many injuries that he learned what you can do, what you can't do, and it's really helped him in his role now. And he's helped a lot of players get back probably quicker than I would have. I want to touch on this potential for 100 wins for Bo Levi Mitchell, and Steve, I want your thoughts on it, because we hear 100 wins or 100 points in different sports. They play so many more games. When you're a quarterback playing 18 or fewer games a season, to get to 100 wins in a career, can you give us some perspective on that significance?
It's mind-blowing, and of course that's why he's an automatic Hall of Famer. I mean, he was a Hall of Famer before he came here. To get those 100, now he's had some really good teams. He's played with outstanding receivers, but he's also made an awful lot of good receivers out of players. Like every year in Calgary, there was at least one player there that he made. And we've seen it this year. Look at the guys who haven't had, like the guys who've had rebound seasons. Dunbar gets cut in Edmonton and doesn't really have, did he even have training camp? Yeah, he came in late into training camp. You've got Robinson, who didn't even play high school football. We even forget about McGriff being hurt early in the year, a guy that they were counting on. Shamar Bridges knew nothing about actually probably not much about football. So a bunch of guys like that, and you're seeing
DeAndre's had a breakout season.
And yes, exactly. And he loves throwing to DeAndre. And I think if Ternowski hadn't been hurt, we would have seen more of him. And don't forget O'Leary Orange as well. I will tell you a little anecdote today from practice. He was just throwing the ball to the corner deep, and 3 times, I think, O'Leary Orange went up and got it. And the place went crazy. As you guys, both former players, were alluding to earlier, the pressure's off a little bit. So there's a lot more excitement around the team because certain pressures are off at the moment. But it was quite a joy to watch. And he now feels confident in jump balls, which I'm sure he didn't feel confident earlier in the year in jump balls because guys weren't getting positioning. They didn't know how to do certain types of things. So a lot of people, so to get 100 wins and to have a number of them this year with a receiving core that really needed to be, really a lot of kind of practice roster guys. A lot of these guys might have been practice roster guys at the start of the year, and now they're starters. So and I credit the coach on the field. And that's what he is. And that's one of the reasons you get 100 wins, because you're a coach on the field.
You mentioned Brendon O'Leary-Orange. I remember telling, I think, all three of you at the game after I talked to him, he's listed at 6'4", but man, he seems bigger than that. He is a big man who can move. He does lead the CFL in yards per catch, almost 20 yards per catch. He has been injured. Luke, as a receiver, if Brendon O'Leary-Orange stays healthy, what do you think he's capable of?
Yeah, well, being a more frequent part of the offense, because the plays that he made were so exciting. I mean, just big catches, but it would be the first and only catch of the game sometimes for him. It was very bizarre in that way. It's also that's a credit to him too, because it's not easy to be on the field on and off for 3.5 quarters without ever touching the ball, and then go and make a big play like we saw him do. I think of the Labor Day Classic game, that long catch down the left side of the field, and it actually didn't end up in the end zone, but it kind of sealed the game for the Ticats, and just a spectacular catch. And there's so many more that he made throughout the season as well. I don't see a reason why that wouldn't become more consistent. I think he strikes me as a guy who's ready to do that, and who's, and it's almost obvious by the way he is making those plays without any seeming warning, or all of a sudden your head's down in the huddle and they call the play that's going to be possibly yours, and he does it. And so it's a testament to him. It was impressive to watch the plays he made this year, and surrounded by a bunch of guys whose numbers were higher, but he was there and making an impact on the game when it was called.
Stick with the receivers for a couple of minutes here, guys, as we go into the final regular season game. Still some things to watch. Tim White could lead the Tiger Cats in receiving for a fourth straight season. He's had some ups and downs, but there he is again, right atop the Tiger Cats receiving yards. Stephen Dunbar is 21 yards from 1,000. Mike, pretty safe to say he'll get that in Friday's game?
Yeah. Unlike the Bo Levi conversation about it in 5,000. Yeah, I'm confident that he'll get the 21 yards this game. Yeah, and hopefully it's in the first quarter, or hopefully it's on his first catch, so he can get that monkey off his back. But yeah, I see him getting it, and what a story for him. I mean, for a little bit there, he seemed like a forgotten all-star receiver. Right, and then near the end of that season, he broke out, had a couple breakout games, and now has been pretty consistent. And it's awesome. A personal friend of mine, I was a teammate of his, and he's just one of those guys that just works harder than everybody, and doesn't complain about anything, wouldn't say anything, just go out there and work harder. And it's really good to see the stuff he's done, and when he reaches that 1,000, it's awesome for him again, right? And I can't wait to see his step for next season with this team, because they have this receiving core. I know we talk about it a lot, but there are weapons everywhere, and each one of them can get open in one-on-one situations, and they're just getting more experience trying to find those zones like Luke was talking about. But it's impressive. It's impressive what he's done.
So, is there any chance he can catch Tim White, Steve, for the team lead? And I'm going to give you some numbers here. He's 147 yards behind Tim White. That seems like a lot. But he's coming off a game where he had 146 yards receiving. And last time against Ottawa, he had 151 yards.
Yeah,
now,
did.
Tim White would have to be pretty much shut down in this game. But does Stephen Dunbar make it a race for the receiving yards lead for the Tiger Cats on Friday?
No. I don't.
I love it. End of answer.
Yeah, and let's not. I'm not in any way underrating the two big games that he had. In fact, I think in that game in against Ottawa, he caught every ball thrown to him. I think there were 8 thrown to him. He made eight receptions, and I agree with obviously Dunbar. This is another tribute to Bo in a way. I think one of the reasons that sometimes he had a big game and he sometimes was forgotten because they maybe concentrated him on a little more. So Bo goes the other way to who's open, bang, back to Dunbar when he is the guy. I think he'll get a lot of yards in this game. But that said, I think he's also a guy that'll be marked a little more. And I think Tim's going to get. I mean, Bo likes throwing the ball to Tim, especially on that delayed cross, and you set up that total and utter mismatch coming across the middle. Now, it could be a suicide play as well because you're coming up against a linebacker going the other way, but Tim can make that happen in the open field, and Tim wants the ball. I mean, he's not yelling, give me the ball, but you know he's there, and you want to get him the ball in open space because you want to make sure he goes into the off season feeling good about himself, knowing what he has to work on, and let's not bury the lead here. He needs to make sure that he comes out ready not to drop the ball as he did earlier in the year, and he had a drop last week as well, so that's important for him to work on. I asked him about that. He says, you work on it. He wants to get guys together in the off season. He wants them to travel, receivers, and maybe a lot of them are up here. All the Canadian guys are accessible here, so maybe he comes up here. But he wants to, and guys have done this before, but he wants to see it happen more so that they can go into. So I'm saying he's committed. He wants the ball. So I don't think Dunbar catches him, but I think Dunbar's had the season he needed to have for his own personal career right now.
Yeah, he should get to 1,000 yards receiving, and he's sneakily, if that's a word, into fourth in the league in yards after the catch too. So he's had some big runs. Luke, Greg Bell, he's 139 yards rushing last week. That led the CFL. Are we seeing a potential superstar here? How have you evaluated him in the games he's played?
Possibly. I think what I really liked about last week, I think we just saw more broken tackles than we've seen throughout the season in a lot of the games. I think that was I saw that as a problem, both for Greg Bell and Butler. At times through the season, just an inability to get through that first line of defense and to break some of the arm tackles. I thought we saw games where the run game sort of was stunted with bad timing, like the running back and the handoff, the exchange in the backfield, just not being in time and in pace with the blocking effort up front with the front five. And last week, the Calgary effort at Tim Hortons Field. It looked better. The ball was getting to the line of scrimmage quickly. Greg Bell was breaking through tackles, falling forward a ton. RJ, I would always nudge you in the booth, when I felt like there was games where our run game was just constantly falling backwards. And that's there's a lot of reasons for that. In some plays, there's, different moves happening by the ball carrier or by a tackler and multiple tacklers. But over the course of a game, I felt like we were showing almost a habit of that. And I think Greg Bell corrected some of that. A lot of falling forward and a lot of breaking tackles. So maybe, I think that the consistency of the run game from the start of the season to the end, certainly, I don't think we've seen that. I don't think we saw that this year from start to finish. And so maybe along with the team effort of just starting faster, I would love to see the run game, although you say starting faster, one of the best run games was the first game of the season this year out west, but that didn't hold through the first half of the season. There was certainly some games where the run game was a real struggle, so we'll see. I mean, Greg Bell does excite me, and some consistency at that position would be good.
When you say nudge me, you mean lower your shoulder and knock my headset off.
That's really how Luke got that big bruise on his head. As RJ got some payback.
RJ hit me with his headset.
My headset got you. Mike, we got to talk your favorite category, knockdowns. Tiger Cats leading the league. Destin Talbert, he's tied for the league lead in knockdowns. He's a rookie. How much do you think he'll learn from this year and going forward? Do you think he's going to turn a lot of those knockdowns into interceptions? Yeah, so for those that don't know why I like knockdowns or dislike knockdowns so much is they're just dropped interceptions. And most knockdowns, listen, the person that's going to lead the league in the CFL in interceptions is just the person that catch all of them that are thrown their way. You don't have to make these unbelievable plays. You just have to be in position within the scheme and within your job. But it's a hard thing to do. Everybody makes fun of DBs. I'm going to go on a tangent here, RJ.
everybody makes fun of DBs about not being able to catch. But if I were to sit there with the ball, RJ, not say anything, and then just throw it at you, it'd be a lot harder to catch than me saying, "Hey, RJ, catch," and then me throwing it to you. So, a little harder for these DBs, but Destin Talbot lead in knockdowns. Yeah, that just means he had a lot of opportunities that he probably could have made some big-time plays. And I can think of a few. There was a few where he dropped out of the sky to try to rob one of those intermediate routes, those digs that are in behind the linebackers. And there's a couple that went right off his chest that I know he wishes he had. But we talked about this at the beginning of the show. Those players that are early on in their careers, it's hard. Like, things are moving very fast. You're used to your job. You're used to seeing maybe one or two things. You can't see the whole field because it's going fast. You're not really sure what you're looking at. And you could see him get better. And the Ticats needed him to get better. From the beginning of the season, it was a holy cow, like, he's got to pick this up fast. And then near the end of the season, you see him consistently making these plays, right? And consistently making some tackles. And they moved him to boundary half where it's a hard spot to be. So yeah, he did get a lot better, and next year I am looking for him to grow even more, get some of those interceptions. But they obviously trust him. The Ticats defense trusts him. Chris Jones trusts him because he's been at boundary half since he got moved over there, and they're seeing something in him. And he is a bigger physical guy, and when he was able to make those plays down the stretch, it was impressive. So I'm looking for him to take another big step and become a playmaker like Jamal Peters was right beside him. And then that can eliminate at least a side for an opposing offense and make them look another way.
I asked Destin about that when he was put beside Jamal Peters. I said, has that helped? And he just went, whew, game changer.
Yeah.
Big smile on his face. So he loved playing with Jamal Peters. Steve, another category to watch for in this final game, quarterback sacks. Casey Sales leads the team with 6. Brandon Barlow has 5. Sales is just 2 off the league lead. Again, how much will he play? But if he does, that'd be pretty cool if he got the sacks lead, wouldn't it be?
I think he'll play a fair amount. Is going back to what I said earlier in the show, is that they'll probably, I think they're going to stick mostly with status quo, at least to start this game, and that'll be only 6 defensive linemen, so he's going to play a lot. And I think it'll be great for him. I think he's having kind of an all-star type year, and I hope he has a shot of that. And numbers help for voters that vote only on numbers, if that's the case. I think there's an opportunity there. Their middle of the line in Ottawa, offensive line, is fairly strong, that Canadian 3 across, but they're a bit vulnerable on the outside. So, and I think that's where it might come from. So it might be that you see somebody on the outside get more sacks in this game, or there might be stunting. Maybe there's some stunting that Sales can come around the other side, or Barlow. It's more likely that Barlow has more, just because of where the weakness is on that team. So the first thing, of course, is stop the run. That's still an issue on this team, and I know Chris is doing a whole bunch of things to stop, and Ottawa is going to try to establish it because they got a really good running back, and that makes their whole game different. And they can then use those deep threats if they can establish the run. So stop the run first, and that's where I think those guys are more important. So yes, the sacks I think are very important, and I think everybody'd like to see those guys get a couple of sacks in the game, and it's entirely possible. But stopping the run is the more important key, and I think then you'll see sacks come.
You brought up something that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if there's a story there, so let's ask our defensive-minded guy, Mike Daly. Of the last 8 touchdowns the Tiger Cats have allowed, 7 of them have been rushing, and the longest has been 15 yards, and that was last game by Matt Schultz. Is there a story there of interest from a defensive perspective that 7 of the last 8 touchdowns allowed have been on the ground?
Yeah, unless diving in a little deeper, I know there's a lot of the sneaks on the 1-yard line, and if you get down there, but there's definitely concern whether it is the touchdowns or not with this defense and defending the run, right? You look at the Winnipeg game specifically down that stretch where they needed to win, and they couldn't do anything to stop the run, and that has been their weak point. So I am curious for this game, for this Ottawa game. I'm sure Chris Jones is going to look at it and say, hey, this is time to experiment a little bit. And let's see if we can do something different with some of the personnel that we have. We saw Nick Usher was standing up as a linebacker earlier on when he was there trying to defend the run. He had 3 linebackers in there on most first downs. He'd sub in another linebacker like Baker, Wilson, and Wilborn, and have those guys in there. So there's going to be something else that's different, but yeah, this is definitely a focal point for this defense. Whether the touchdowns are an issue or not with it, I just think that has to be the main point of focus for Chris Jones this game.
Luke, how many times did you miss the playoffs in your career?
Just 2017, so 1 out of 7 years.
Wow. So you might not be an expert on what the approach into a final game, not missing the playoffs, but what are you expecting in this one on Friday?
Yeah, or the exception to that would be in 2019, though, we had meaningless games because we were first in the East. And then we're going to be going into a bye week in that first game of the first week of the playoffs. I was so injured that year. I played in 9 of the 18 games in different chunks of the season, and I was healthy at the end. So I played a lot in that last game because I hadn't played very much all year. And so I'm thinking back to that game as you go into this. The season wasn't over, but it was a meaningless game, and I did feel what we've talked about. Just an energy and excitement, and sort of a very low pressure sort of setting for that game. You got to go out energized. You have to go out ready to play hard because, like Mike mentioned earlier, it's actually a very easy way to get injured if you're not kind of amped up for a football game. And so I think we're going to see a good game on Friday. Honestly, RJ, and these guys, they love football and they're not going to play it for a couple months, and you might as well go out and try to be great.
Mike, how many times did you miss?
Just like Luke, that 2017 season in my 9 years. So,
but remember, Mike Daly was injured, which is why we missed the playoffs that year. So Mike wasn't
solely
playing
the reason that they had missed it. But yeah, it was.
We got winners on Ticats Audio Network. Just winners.
Well, and I'm with Luke on that. It is. I didn't get to play in that season, but I just remember being around there. I was helping coach with the Ticats during that season as well, helping out on the defensive side, and there was an energy that was just an excitement to get out and play. There's, it's not like you can call up 12 of your buddies or 24 of your buddies and say, hey, let's all put equipment on and go play in the park, right? It just doesn't happen that way. So there's only a certain amount of times you get to do this, and as a professional athlete, you never know when your last one's going to be. So you'd be hard pressed to sit there and go 80% and not give it your all in every game that you don't know where you'll be. So I expect these guys to fly around and have some fun while they're doing it. With the big plays that are going to happen, I expect them to celebrate together. Hopefully have some handshakes, some dances lined up, because that's what you got to do. And it's your last party with your buddies out there, so you might as well go out and have a good time.
We've covered a lot in this show, Steve, going into this final game. Are there some storylines you're focused on?
Yeah, and some of it's from Ottawa. As I say, I'd like to see what they're going to be doing and what they're thinking about. I mean, they obviously, as I mentioned earlier, they want to establish their run game. They want to make sure Drew Brown is right on top of the game. He'll start. I'm positive of that. And I think the other thing is to watch the Ticats, and I'll see this in person. I think it's going to be the same kind of atmosphere it was in Hamilton this week. There's a team trying to establish itself in front of their last game, in front of the home fans, and you saw what Hamilton did there. So that's probably the atmosphere they're going to be facing against Ottawa. And I think they'll know that going in. Scott's preparing for them for that already, to say, hey, they're us last week, and look what we did, and look how we came out. So this is what you're going to face. And I think that's exciting in a way, because it makes something, and I don't want to say out of nothing, because there's no game that's nothing, but this makes something out of a game that could be described in some quarters as meaningless, because now you're coming up against a team that has something to play for, that is in front of its home fans, that is trying to do a number of things that they're trying to do. So I think this is actually good for Hamilton, and that's what I'll be watching for, is how that all plays out.
Final game of 2024 is on Friday. It is a 7 o'clock start. Tiger Cats are in Ottawa to take on the Redblacks. You can catch the pregame show with Mike Daly and Bubba O'Neill at 6 o'clock Eastern Time on ticats.ca/listen. Luke Tasker and I will have the call at 7 o'clock. For Mike Daly, Luke Tasker, Steve Milton, I'm RJ Broadhead. Thank you for listening to Ticats and watching Ticats this week. It's not our last show. Keep that in mind. We'll have a show next week, a season wrap, so hope you can check that out too.
This has been the Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today. Like and follow the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast content, and get a deeper understanding of your Hamilton Tiger Cats.